This here is Kinapa, a game where you are trying to place pairs matching the cards on the table. I'm going to show you how to set up this cute little game, but also how to play it. So let's not waste any time and let's just take a look at this game. First thing we need to do during setup is to separate the decks. We need to separate the objective cards, meaning the ones with blue background, from the other cards with the white background. Next we need to see which of these objective cards that we will be using. And we will decide that by seeing how many players that are in this game and then multiplying that number. This here is a 4-player game. So we will take 4 and multiply it, giving us 8. So we should use the cards here from 1 to 8. Next we need to place out the sheep and minister cards in the center of the table, and then place out the objective cards around these cards. Next we need to take the animal cards with the paw symbol, but also the shelter cards with the little building symbol, and shuffle these together. And then we deal out 4 cards to each player. The player that gets this card with the cat, with number 1 in the top left corner, will become the first player. And will also get the Emperor card, because now you are the Emperor in the start of this game. So now we have done the setup and we are ready to start playing the game. Now, during each turn of a player's phase, they will eventually become the Emperor. And when you are the Emperor, you are going to get the chance to get some cards from the other players. And what you want is to get cards that will match the blue objective cards in future turns, to get pairs and get cards off your hand. Now, as an Emperor, you will go through 4 different steps. So when you are the Emperor, it's your turn to try to get cards from the other players and get pairs. Now, it's a good idea for you to plan ahead here and look at your cards to figure out what you want and what you need in the future. So if you have a pair of 7s, you might not want more 7s. So try to get 8 and 1 instead. But of course, this is all up to you. When you know which card you want from the other players, you say Kinapa out loud, and then the number after. The number being the card that you want from the other players. So if I want another 1, for example, I should say Kinapa 1. And then I need to count down from 3, just to give the other players a little time to think and plan. And now the other players have 2 choices. They can choose to either raise their hand. If they raise their hand, this means that I do not have the card. But they might be lying. The second choice is to simply do nothing and not raise your hand. This means that, well, maybe I have the card or maybe I don't have the card. Depending on how many players that did not raise their hands, different things will happen. If 2 or more players did not raise their hands, the Emperor will have to choose one of these players and take one of their cards at random, and then give them back one of the cards that they have on their hand. If 1 or 0 players did not raise their hands during this turn, well, then the Emperor has to order out the card, saying that the number that I want needs to be given now. So whoever has that number on their hand would need to give that card to the Emperor. And then the Emperor needs to give 1 card back. But if the player who had this card was lying, meaning that they had their hand raised, saying that they did not have the card, but it turns out that they did, well, then the Emperor needs to yell out, "Liar!" And then the liar needs to be punished. The player who lied will now get the 2 fox cards from the center of the table and place them in front of them. They will be here for 2 turns. meaning that at the end of your next turn, you should remove one card. And at the end of your second turn, you need to remove the second card. But as long as you have these two cards in front of you, the other cards that you have are placed face up on the table, being revealed for all players. And now you may not raise your hand. But if they do not have any sheep cards in front of them, they will have priority to become the emperor at the end of their round. But I will tell you more about the sheep cards in a bit. But there is a little special occasion here, and that is if the player who is the emperor yells out a number that they already have a pair of. There is only one pair per number in this game, meaning that if you yell out a number that you have a pair of on your hand, you know that the other players don't have this card. Now, if all the other players raises their hand, indicating that, hey, I don't have this card, nothing will happen and no cards will exchange. But if one player does not raise their hand, indicating that, hey, we might have this card, the emperor will know that they are not telling the truth, because you have the pair, so they can't have it. So now the emperor can choose this player and take one card at random from this player, and then give them one card back. At the end of the turn, the emperor flips over one of the objective cards to show for all players. If they have the matching pair of this number on their hand, they place those cards on that objective cards. And then they need to flip over another objective card. If they again have the matching pair of this card, they would place them on this card, winning the game. But if they do not have a matching pair of this number here, we would simply flip the card back. So if the emperor managed to put down two pairs on the table during their turn, well, they win the game. But if they don't, we simply flip the objective card back to being face down, and the game continues. But now the other players know what this card was, and kind of needs to remember what number it had to match that pair in the future. If players have raised their hand during this turn, the emperor chooses one of those players to become the next emperor. But if no player raised their hand during this turn, well, the emperor remains the same. So what about the sheep cards, right? Well, the sheep cards is giving to the player that becomes the emperor. Meaning that when you get the emperor card, you also get a sheep card. These sheep cards will ensure that all players can become the emperor in future turns, because the players that does not have a sheep card in front of them is prioritized to become the emperor. But if a player has been lying during their turn and does not have a sheep card, that player will instead become prioritized to become the emperor. When all players have received a sheep card, we place the sheep cards back into the center of the table, except the last sheep card we have handed out, and then the game continues as normal. And that's how you play the game, by trying to get the correct number on your hand and get the right pairs out on the table. Whoever gets two pairs out on the table first is the winner of the game. In the two-player game mode of this game, you need to use these game aid cards. These will kind of be like an AI, indicating if they have raised or not raised their hand. Other than that, the game would pretty much work out the way it did in a normal game. And if you play 3 players, you could also use this card as an extra player. And that was Kinapa, my friend, a game that is quite easy to learn and that you can play with younger ones. But it can be quite hard to master. I mean, you need to get the right cards on your hand, you need to match them up with the objective cards out on the table, but you also need to remember where these cards that you want to match up with was out on the table. The game itself does not take that long time to set up, it does not take that long time to learn, but it is a game that will be quite fun for all ages. That, my friend, was Kinapa. This is a cool little trick game. I mean, you are trying to trick your opponents that you don't have the card that you have because you want it, but also by not saying anything at all, trying to match up the pairs. This here is a nice little in-between meals or travel size game. I think this does what it's supposed to do. It takes the casual players and put them into a funny environment, but it also takes the more experienced players and just have a good time for a moment without too much strategy, without too much setup. This game becomes just what it is supposed to be, a fun little card game. If you want to know more about it, well, check out the links down in the description. If you like my channel, you know what to do. If you want to, of course, I'm not gonna force you. I mean, subscribe if you want to. It does mean a lot. But what I will ask from you is to keep on spreading that board gaming love I know you all have. Peace out, my friend.